Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And just a few days ago, Disney announced that they were going to actually lay off 28,000 employees. I think they've been previously furloughed. You know, honestly, these are unprecedented times. You know, retail, we don't even know what's going to happen with this retail sector across America, across the world. But Disney specifically, with cruise lines being shut down, most theme parks aren't really up and running. And if they are, they're at very limited capacity. They're not really releasing movies right now. The only thing that really that Disney has going for them is Disney Plus, which is a relatively new streaming service, although it did break records and shattered expectations as far as the amount of subscribers that they have. But other than that, they're going through a hard time. 28,000 layoffs. And obviously, underneath the Disney umbrella is something that's very near and dear to my heart, Marvel Comics. So we're going to talk about the Disney layoffs, all those effects, and then we're going to kind of bring it full circle back to Marvel. And here with me to talk about that is freelance editor, freelance writer, Aaron Sparrow. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Wes. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent, but I want, before we get into this, I do want to say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you like this content. Give us a thumbs down if you don't. Now, Aaron, you live in the area, and it sounds like a majority of these layoffs are as a result, according to Disney, of Governor Newsom's refusal to open up theme parks in California. I believe there's about 7,000 of the layoffs are in the Florida area, but the vast majority are over in California. The movie industry has been hit very hard. I imagine like art house pictures or smaller budget movies really aren't going to be in production for quite a while unless it's like a big movie that they think when it finally comes out, they can make a lot of money. They're probably not going to be financing it right now. So out of work actors who have part-time jobs kind of at Disney parks and other places, you know, they're getting further screwed, right?
Definitely. Yeah, you're right. I live in the area. I actually drive past the park, you know, right down Catella Avenue a couple days a week. And it's been a ghost town, you know, since the whole lockdown started. But the news this week that they're going to be cutting so many of the park employees is really disheartening, not only for, you know, us as, you know, Disney fans that go to the park, but for people that, you know, obviously the people that work there. It's just devastating. I've had a couple of friends affected, you know, they've been let go, and it's absolutely crushing to see them talk about it, because, you know, these are people who really believe in kind of like the magic of being a cast member and the experience that you bring to the park goer and to the customer. And, you know, to see kind of like those dreams kind of get crushed is just really heartbreaking. The one bright spot is that it seems like the guy that they've got in charge of the parks, I hope I'm getting his name right, I think it's Josh D'Amato. He actually went to downtown Disney and met with as many people as wanted to talk to him and cry on his shoulder, and, you know, which I thought was huge. You know, I can't ever see Bob Iger or, you know, a CEO of any big company that you could probably name actually going and meeting with the people that they're letting go and letting them vent, and, you know, telling them that, you know, if things improve, you know, we do hope to bring a lot of you back. You know, you don't really see that. So I thought that I think that the park maybe is in really good hands. They're at least in the hands of somebody who has the class to go out and meet with the people that they're letting go. But yeah, it's absolutely devastating. And I think this is just the beginning of cuts that we're going to see at Disney.
Yeah, obviously, you know, we saw that not too long ago. Warner Media, obviously, that's where DC Comics resides, but that is a direct competitor for Disney with all their media productions. They just had a major overhaul, you know, basically HBO Max did not launch quite like they wanted it to, and it kind of trickled down and ended up affecting everything. But here's some of the numbers that we know about what Disney is doing right now. So basically, in 2019, Disney's Parks, Experiences, and Consumer Products division brought in revenues greater than any other division or segment in Disney at $26.23 billion, or approximately 37% of Disney's overall revenue for the year. That is a lot of money. And I've heard some people are saying like, well, Disney's still going to make, $11 billion. No. They might have revenue of 11, but gross revenue and net revenue are two different things. And this is what, according to CNBC, this is what's happening to Disney's bottom line right now. Disney has been hemorrhaging money since the outbreak began. In the second quarter, the company reported a $1 billion loss in operating income due to the closure of the parks, hotels, and cruise lines. In the third quarter, the company released a steeper loss of $3.5 billion. We know that they have acquired around $16 billion in new credit and debt, new access to debt. So they are, kind of preparing for these steeper losses. But, you can really only lose money for so long. It's crazy. I mean, when this stuff, do you remember when all this was happening, January and February timeframe, and everything kind of just shut down in March? I couldn't have imagined we would actually get to October and most everything wouldn't have been open. I thought all this stuff would kind of be opening around July.
Well, we went from, it's the continual shifting of the goalposts. We went from flatten the curve to, we have to find a cure for death, basically, is the way that it's working in California. The governor keeps revising his plan for reopening, which, not terrible in and of itself. You should be reacting to new data, but he seems to be taking all of the wrong lessons, from a pandemic that is 99% survivable for the majority of people, the majority of, the majority of California residents, 99% survival rate. So it seems like we're just completely shutting everything down. And, like I said, the goalpost keeps getting shifted outward. And it's like, oh, the numbers are going up. But testing is also dramatically increasing. And if you look at like some of the latest data, which, I'm kind of interested in that sort of thing. So, I go and check it out. The tests are ramping up at a much steeper level than the reported cases. So yeah, reported cases are going up because you're seeing so much more testing, but they're leveling off in a way that the testing is not. So, when you see those curves, you say to yourself, oh, okay, well, obviously there's more cases, but that's because, they just keep increasing testing. But the amount of deaths is not rising with that. And so, you have to ask yourself, at what point do we say that we need to get back to normal? It seems like these politicians, I don't know if it's because they have a taste of the power that comes with controlling everybody and they don't want to relinquish it, or they overreacted and they just don't want to admit it. And so that they need to kind of like maintain the fear because, admitting a mistake seems to be political death to these people. But, he will not lift the lockdowns. And Disney even named him in their, the press release that they put out saying that, our inability to communicate with him on this issue, we don't have any other choice.
They were like imploring him, please open up our park. We, basically saying they didn't want to have to lay more people off. And Governor Newsom's office actually got back to him and he said, shortly, we're going to have an announcement on theme parks very shortly. That was over 2 weeks ago. We're coming up on 3 weeks ago. That is not very shortly.
No. Well, I mean, he's got haircuts to go get, and he's got to run his winery business, and allegedly commit some real estate fraud. So
it's crazy with California, and they have debt that's amazing. It's when you realize the amount of debt, along with the tax codes that they have, the tax brackets, they're the highest in the nation. They have unsustainable debt. You got rolling brownouts that are happening now. I mean, I don't understand how that state can afford to not have everybody employed right now and having as much income coming in and kind of feeding the monster so they can pay for all their programs and keep people's power on right now. But it almost like, obviously I don't know the governor, but it almost feels like willful ignorance.
Well, sadly in California, we seem to elect the worst people all of the time simply because they have a D next to their name on the ballot. No matter what your political affiliation is, I feel like you occasionally have to bite the bullet and vote for the other party, even if, you're somebody who's like a staunch, supporter of your own party. I think sometimes that you have to vote somebody else in and, let them run with it for a little while. And the reason that I think that is because politicians need to be afraid of losing their seat. They need to know that they're beholden to the people of their state.
Well,
And
and their
in
own
California,
track
that
record.
doesn't
If you
happen.
don't
And
perform well,
that you get the
you're
boot,
out.
right? It's like, hey, in the words of Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, if you don't do the job, you don't get paid. But, these people do get paid. They go into office where they're making, $100,000, a year, and somehow they come out multimillionaires. Nancy Pelosi is worth $178 million from a career in government work. That's unbelievable. So
Vice
these people
president?
get into office and they're in charge of deciding, making these decisions about the way that, these things that are going to affect the economics of their state, and they have no conception of how to run things, and they get in as a career, and that's it. So I think, again, no matter what party you're a part of, I think that, we need term limits, obviously, and obviously we're going off the rails here. We're getting into the into the minutia of politics. But yeah, it's really bad in this state. The politicians are essentially dictators for life. They get into that position and they never get voted out. Like look at Maxine Waters. She's one of our most useless politicians, and you can't get rid of her. Her district.
You know what's crazy, and we're going to get a lot of feedback on this. Is like, but the coronavirus, President Trump has it now. It's deadly. You could die if you get the coronavirus. You have to stop the spread, and I agree with that. You need to be. We need to take the threat seriously. Absolutely, but
yeah,
dying of starvation is real. If people don't have money to eat, they're going to die. And if the state doesn't have money to provide for the poor people, which you're not going to have if you have no income because nobody's working because you can't tax anybody. Like no one's thinking about the big picture. Like, yes, you do have to take risks. You have to mitigate risk, but you have to take some risks. And you're going to have to eventually open up the economy sometime. Maybe I remember everyone was kind of condemning Florida, and it looks like Florida kind of made the right call.
The thing about California that it puts it in a particularly precarious position is that our tax base is almost entirely based on the rich. So if there was a report, like even I think it was right before the coronavirus came out, but it was just about the bad situation that California is tax-wise, where they were saying if less than 5% of the tax base, which is, rich people, your Silicon Valley types, if they leave the state and they take their income with them, the state is unsustainable at its current levels of spending. It is absolutely, and its current levels of debt is absolutely unsustainable. And there's reports out there that say that our level of debt is unsustainable anyway. So you have something like this hit, and you refuse to let the economy start moving again, and you're going to have some real problems in this state. You think that there's, people are dying from the coronavirus, like you said, people are going to be. The suicide rate is already through the roof with these lockdowns. It's increased dramatically. So
is divorce.
Yeah, and so is divorce, and so is but this is a breakdown that we're seeing in our society based on these decisions that these politicians are making. And when I posted that I felt bad for the employees of Disneyland that were getting laid off, all the cast members, and I in there I said that part of the reason is because of our governor. I had a friend of mine who come at me and like praise his decisions and say that I should be blaming Disney for not just continuing to pay these people. And this person defines himself as a democratic socialist, so I'm kind of not surprised at that attitude. But Disney as a corporation does not have the money to pay people indefinitely to not work when they are not bringing in the amount of revenue.
Company. They owe their investors financial responsibility. You can't go out of your way to lose money.
No, you absolutely can't. And with them not bringing in the revenue, because if you think about it, Disney's entire business, maybe they should have been more diversified, because their entire business model is based on crowds and is based on entertainment. And neither of those things are operating right now. You can't have a crowd.
I think they thought they were diversified. They didn't take into consideration that just being in the entertainment and sector wasn't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, we got movies, we got TV, we got theme parks, we got cruise lines. Can't shut down the ocean and the land.
Right, but we've effectively shut down both, and it's really alarming because you're seeing this huge company that people have different opinions of Disney. Some people hate them, some people love them. I'm not going to begrudge you either way. As somebody who's a huge Disney fan, I can say that I like a lot of things that Disney has produced without necessarily agreeing with every decision that they make on a corporate level, obviously. But for such a huge company to be brought this low, they don't have unlimited funds. And I still end up arguing with people when they're like, well, the theme parks are only a very small part of Disney's, overall. And I'm like, have you looked at the reports? Have you looked at their financial reports? Have you ever bothered to look? The parks pay for everything. If one division loses money, no problem. We'll raise the price of hot dogs in the park and that'll cover that loss. That's how Disney has always operated. And they don't have that ability now. And I think you're going to see it get a lot worse before it gets better, especially the longer that this stretches on. And like you were saying, it's going to affect all departments within Disney, and Marvel is one of them.
So speaking of Marvel, obviously, we're not going to get a Marvel Studios MCU movie in 2020 now. The Black Widow's been pushed to 2021. So they're definitely kind of waiting to finally cash in on the MCU again. I imagine that they believe that'll be a lot of income, but they're not going to want to release any of those movies until movie theaters are open and people feel safe going back to movies, because they could potentially be losing like hundreds of millions of dollars just as far as a showing of a movie for the lifetime of it. But Marvel Comics especially, they do not lose money. That's one of the weird misnomers out there. Marvel Comics does not lose money, but they're not a huge revenue generator either. Marvel's looking to cut expenses. We know Kevin Feige is technically the chief creative officer, but he hasn't really made any changes. We've kind of been waiting for him to put his stamp on Marvel Comics. I think the pandemic has kind of postponed that and pushed it off, but eventually, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and we're going to start seeing substantial changes. And I imagine the pandemic, with all the losses, Disney's losing billions of dollars a quarter now. They have a lot of access to debt and credit, but obviously those come with interest rates and things of that nature. They probably want to rely on that as little as possible. But they're going to be cutting down some expenses. Eventually, it is going to trickle down to Marvel Comics. I know, obviously, you are a comic book writer. You have some connection with the industry. Are your friends that are associated with Marvel, are they nervous about this?
Everybody's pretty tight-lipped, but I will tell you one thing I am seeing a lot of artists that I know and that I've worked with in the past, that have worked at, and now have like gotten some Marvel work, gotten some DC work. They are now reaching out to me and saying like, hey, I haven't worked since March. Do you know of anything out there? Are you working on anything? Are you crowdfunding anything? Anything I could be involved with? And I've been trying to pass them off to, guys I know that are, successful crowdfunders and things like that, like, hand them over and say, hey, if you've got a project for this guy's looking for work. So many of the artists are out of work now. Marvel's going to be cutting back. DC's already cut back. I think you're going to see even more of it. The other thing that's alarming, just take one of the things that have affected us with this Disney layoff. A lot of the customers that come into, the stores are people that worked at the parks. So a lot of comic customers now don't have any revenue. They're now going to be on unemployment, which is substantially less. I think it's something like $167 a week, to start. And, it goes up from there, but not that much. They're going to be struggling to pay rent, pay car insurance, pay all the bills that they have to pay.
Also, 2/3 of those layoffs were part-time employees, so.
Yeah. So, and that might have been expendable income for them, because maybe they work another job, but then they work part-time at the park.
Yeah, but the unemployment benefit that goes along with it is greatly reduced or not even available.
Yeah. So, you're going to see, that's going to affect our orders on, on some of the books that we sell, obviously, because we're going to be selling less books. So that, just one shop, Marvel can maybe absorb that. But, if that's happening all over the country, and you've got people dropping their pull lists because they can't afford it, there's not so many comic customers that it's sustainable. Yeah, I think if you lose even 10% of the regular comic buying customers, you're going to see shops go out of business, and then that's less books ordered. And that's, Marvel can only print so many variants for so many customers before that
Yeah.
that well runs dry as well. So
It's
it's
crazy.
absolutely
We don't even
catastrophic.
know really what the fallout in the industry is going to be. The right now the estimation is that in New York City, it's between 40 and 50% of all restaurants and bars are going to close permanently because of the pandemic shutdowns. And we know the PPP loans are out there for retail and small business, but some of those are kind of starting to come due. And there's a good chance that basically brick and mortar retail is going to be borderline wiped out nationwide.
Yeah, it's the only company that'll be left is Amazon.
Like, what is it in Demolition Man? Everything is Taco Bell.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That seems to be what we're headed towards if this doesn't. I mean, at least in your big blue states where these lockdown, you've got the politicians keeping everything locked down. I don't think that I'm out of line to say that De Blasio has been an absolute disaster for New York City, and everything that's going on there, and I feel really bad for them, and I see all the reports of all the U-Hauls of people moving out. The people that have the money are going to move out. And de Blasio is like, well, no problem. We'll just tax the rich. And it's like, well, who do you think is moving out of your city? The
Yep.
poor people can't afford to move out. Your middle class maybe can afford to move out if they've saved a little bit of money and they can get the hell out of there. But, if they, fortunately in New York, not a lot of people own property. A lot of people rent. So, maybe they can get out of there. But, you're seeing the big cities like San Francisco, New York, all those chickens are coming home to roost where all of their bad policies now are starting to affect them because the people that they've been taxing to death are just going to leave. And
Well, they
it's
also
not
had
gonna
all
leave.
these inflated housing markets where the cost of for what you were getting was astronomical, and it's all that stuff's going to burst because there's demand will be gone.
Yeah, and who wants to live in New York right now anyway? When someone punches Rick Moranis in the head walking down the street, that's not a city I want to live in. Rick Moranis
Yeah.
is a treasure.
Absolutely, it's a Canadian treasure at that.
Yeah, I felt so awful when I read that story. But it's happening to people all over the city, and we
It's a
just
breakdown of civility.
yeah, it's just I don't know, man. I used to laugh when I would, rewatch like Escape from New York, and I'm like, they thought this was what the future was going to be like, and now I'm like, oh no, they were just off by a few years. But yeah, they're pretty accurate.
And it's crazy. I hate to see what's happening. Obviously, this is worldwide. We're seeing these things in the Philippines. Here, the government has finally said, "Screw it, we're opening things up. It doesn't matter anymore," because they have no income. They've basically spent all their rainy day money. It's like, what do you mean we don't have? We have a budget. Well, you didn't budget for no one paying taxes because they don't have jobs right now. Like, well, that was a little bit short-sighted. We're gonna have to open things up and take a little bit of risk, and eventually, other places around the world are gonna have to take that stance. And it's terrible. Hopefully, enough comic shops can survive, but we just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't want people to die. You want to mitigate that as best you can. But the fact of the matter is that people are going to die one way or the other. Whether it's from being perpetually locked down and losing everything and committing suicide, or being thrown out and being out on the streets, and having something bad happen to them. There's all kinds of factors to this, and there has to be an equilibrium. You can't just have never-ending lockdowns.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. We've known since March, because Italy provided a great first test case that the people that were most at risk and vulnerable were the elderly and people with certain pre-existing conditions. But rather than protect them, we just decided to put a bubble on everybody, and I don't know.
And everybody's got their armchair analysis, us included. But the fact of the matter is, and this is the way that I look at politics too, is the most important thing to me. People are like, oh, what about this issue? What about this issue? And I'm like, yes, we can discuss that. But first and foremost, the most important thing is that the machine is kept running. And the question you have to ask yourself is, who is going to keep the machine running so that we can have these discussions about all these other issues? Because I'll tell you what, give me an issue. Let's say your biggest issue is abortion. if the economy collapses and and the country becomes Venezuela and there's anarchy and there's people breaking into the zoos to eat giraffes because they don't have any food, if that happens, you're not going to be able to get an abortion anyway. So that is not the most important issue. The most important issue is keeping the machine going, and then everything else comes after it. I'm not saying those aren't important issues, and obviously they're very important, to some people, but everything depends on the country being in working order. So the question is, you have to ask yourself, how do we do that? Who's the best candidate to keep it running? What party is the best party to keep it going? And which party is the one that's going to, run it off a cliff?
I don't like any politicians, if I'm being completely honest. I don't trust any of them.
Me either. Like I'm very, I think that anybody who knows me knows that I'm very, very cynical about politicians, and I'm not a team person. I'm not a joiner. I'm not somebody who defines myself by any political party or belief system. I try to take things as issues individually. I try to be a rugged individualist. But if you want to get right down to it, I do believe in the Constitution. I do believe that this is, a country that has lifted more people out of poverty, through capitalism than any other country on the face of the earth. I'm not saying that we don't have our problems, but I also don't subscribe to the idea that this is a terrible, racist, horrible country that's, been awful from the beginning and has never done any good. You're not going to get me on board with that message. So I'm, I'm politically homeless, I guess.
You and I both. So, Aaron, I do want to say thank you very much. I apologize to the viewers that we might have talked a little bit too much politics. We don't really talk about politics all that often here on the channel. And it also sounds like there might be some popping in the audio, and I do apologize that. I am in the Philippines. Aaron is in California. We do the best we can with what we have. There might not have had the greatest connection today, but I do appreciate the information. I think people pretty much get what we're talking about.
Maybe people will appreciate the popping if we also did a little locking. That's terrible.
You want a little robot?